And welcome to Capital Agenda on this Sunday. We begin with the price of a good education. This Sunday, the clock is ticking for Ohio's lawmakers as the deadline nears for a court-ordered overhaul of the state school funding formula. Top lawmakers are jockeying for position, trying to get their own plans at the front of the debate. But the question this Sunday is, can they find the right solution in such a short amount of time? And how much is it going to cost us taxpayers? Let's start our debate with this report from the Agenda's Jason Mock.
With the stroke of a pen Tuesday, lawmakers sent a message to Ohio school districts. Financial help is on the way.
There should be no hidden cost to districts that is not otherwise covered in the monies that we are providing.
The bill relieves school districts of financial burdens imposed on them by the state. It lowers the amount districts must set aside for textbooks and maintenance and eliminates the requirement that districts keep a rainy day reserve fund.
What we did was really what the school districts, many of them, had asked us to do, Governor. I know you toured this state and talked to many of those.
The bill marks the first significant response to last year's Ohio Supreme Court ruling, which said Ohio's school funding system is still unconstitutional. Lawmakers have until June 15th to give the court their solution.
It's just too early to get into the specifics of our proposals. We're looking at the legislative ideas, and there are many good legislative ideas. We're looking at the Department of Education's ideas.
Governor Bob Taft expects to unveil his ideas in a January 24th State of the State address. But Senate Republicans may have a leg up, saying they're already on the verge of releasing their own plan, though some Democrats are skeptical.
I read the headlines of the paper today that said the Senate or Republicans were going to introduce a plan. I've still got the paper that said Dewey defeats Truman and Gore wins Florida, and I'm putting it right in that same category.
The real concern here on Capitol Square is not when a school funding plan might be approved, but how much it might cost. State sales tax revenues have come in more than $100 million below expectations over the last 6 months, and at least some of the school funding plans on the table could cost as much as $1 billion. At the State House, Jason Mock for Capital Agenda.
All right, all you have to do is listen to Jason's report, and the bottom line here is school funding is sure to dominate the debate at the State House for the next several months, and the solution is sure to come with a hefty price tag. There's been estimates of upwards, as Jason said, $1 billion. That's billion, B, $1 billion. And that's where we start this Sunday's discussion. Joining me this morning is Bill Phillips, head of the group that successfully sued the state over school funding, and Scott Pullins, Ohio director of the National Taxpayers Union. And Scott, if it goes to $1 billion, taxes are going to have to be raised.
Well, I think it won't go as high as $1 billion. I think it's more realistic to go as high as $500 to $700 million. And if you do it that way, we think that enough spending can be cut elsewhere in the state budget in order to keep that money coming in and keep a balanced budget.
Bill Phillips, you've seen the figures. You see what's not going to come in as far as Ohio's sales tax is concerned. We also got a Medicaid problem as far as the state is concerned. Are your group willing to give in at all as far as some of the things that you want and maybe lower the cost of your proposal?
No, we're not willing to compromise the constitutional provision that requires the state to promulgate a thorough and efficient system of common schools. That constitutional responsibility is unconditional. The General Assembly has the responsibility. The General Assembly in the state in general has squandered an opportunity to help themselves out of this dilemma.
What way? In what way?
Well, the last 3 years they've given $1.8 billion back to taxpayers in a tax, in the tax rebate. So they've squandered that opportunity.
Well, but the economy was doing well, and it was a thing that, they said, okay, well, let's give some of the taxpayers a break and give some of the money back.
Well, I've been around 25 years, both in the State Department of Education and what I'm doing now with the coalition. And in economic bad times, legislators and governors will say, well, we'd like to do more for schools, but we have bad times. Then in good times, when they could do more for schools, they give the money back.
Scott, you're in for the taxpayers. Are you glad that they gave $1.8 billion back to the taxpayers?
Well, frankly, they probably should have given back more. The fact is that our income taxes are 8th highest in the nation, and those high income taxes drive good jobs, high-paying manufacturing jobs, high-paying technology jobs into lower tax states. So we need to cut taxes. We need to cut taxes further in order to keep those good-paying jobs here that actually pay the taxes that fund our schools.
Well, where is the money going to come from? If we continue the economic slowdown, if we have this Medicaid problem, and we want to also have our rainy day fund somewhat in a substantial good shape, so to speak, where's the money going to come from? You're going to have to raise taxes.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily true, and I really think there's no support in the legislature to do that.
Where are we going to cut then? Where are we going to cut? You said earlier, about a few minutes ago, you said you could cut. Where are you going to cut?
I think most agencies in state government, except for Medicaid and education, are going to see pretty dramatic cuts. I think there's still growth in the economy. It's not as fast as it has been, so you'll see some growth in the tax base there. And frankly, I think legislators are going to have to take a hard look at how we spend our Medicaid dollars. Frankly, over the past few years, we've expanded Medicaid too much, and that's why the costs are going up so high.
All right, Bill, where can they cut to meet the $1 billion
Well,
if it gets there?
I don't think there's any way to cut to solve the school funding problem. And it's not a matter of whether we're going to have a tax increase or not. We're going to have a tax increase, but that tax increase is going to be applied either at the state level or at the local level in the property tax. In fact, this past year, over 200 new tax levies passed in the various districts across the state. And that's happened year after year after year. So it's not a matter of whether or not we're going to have a tax increase. We're going to have a tax increase. And it's a matter, the point is, it's either going to be at the state level or the local level.
You've talked with some of the people on the task force, and you've talked with some of the people in both houses of the legislature. What plan do you like to see that's coming forth right now? What are some of the ideas you like that your group likes to see, hey, that might not be a bad idea?
Well, there are a lot of divergent ideas coming forward.
There are a lot of them.
But what we've said from the very inception, in fact, just as soon as the court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, what we said to state government is the first thing that state government has to do is define the elements of a thorough and efficient system. In other words, what resources are necessary for a quality education? Is all-day, everyday kindergarten? Is preschool? What's the pupil-teacher ratio? Before we can put a price tag on education, we have to find out exactly what is going to be available for kids.
All right, you've said that now for the last 3 or 4 years, and you say the legislature still hasn't come up with any kind of priorities?
Well, and we're going to continue to say that because we believe that that's the constitutional approach to solving this problem.
But we're coming up to a deadline, so there has to be a dollar figure involved here, too.
Well, of course, we've been at a deadline before.
Let me go back to the original question then.
Yeah.
Out of all the diversification and all the plans that you've seen, what ones do you like now in terms of how we raise money to fund the plan?
Well, you know, obviously, there are only a couple of good sources of money, income and sales. And it's either income sales at the state level or property tax at the local level. We'd rather see state taxes increase rather than the local property tax.
What about industrial taxes and one big lump sum, and then we get kind of divvy it out with some kind of formula to schools across the state of Ohio?
Well, if you mean tapping into the commercial and industrial tax base, we've always opposed that concept.
Why?
We've opposed it because we don't want to have equalized mediocrity. What we want is to use the state resources to raise up the bottom, to level up from the bottom. When you get into this whole concept of leveling down, what happens is that you have no lighthouse districts. You end up with everybody in the middle with the mediocrity, and obviously we don't want that. No one wants that.
What you're saying, if we go with the commercial taxes, you're talking about then that down in Vinton County we'd get the same amount of money that someplace, let's say in Franklin County, would get, and you don't necessarily want that?
Well, no. I mean, if we have to improve Vinton County at the expense of good educational programming in other areas of the state, that doesn't help. That doesn't help the state economy. That doesn't help the state as a whole.
Okay.
Ohio this is not Mississippi. I mean, we're a wealthy state. We can afford quality education for all kids, and we can afford to use the resources of the state to level up from the bottom, to bring the bottom up.
Scott, what plan do you like in terms of, if you're out there defending a taxpayer, you're defending me and saying I want to pay my tax dollars to schools. What plan would you say, Dave, this is a good plan?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to remember that this problem wasn't created overnight. It was created over a 30-year period. So it's probably not going to be solved overnight. So we like what the legislature's done over the last 4 or 5 years. They've steadily been increasing the amount of funds we've given schools. They've done a bond issue, and a lot of tobacco settlement money will be going to school construction. Right. And we think that over time, you continue to steadily increase the money that goes to school, and we'll get this problem solved.
But where's the tax increase going to come? Because Bill says we're going to have one. Where do you think it'll come?
I don't think we need a tax increase, and I don't think the governor is sold on that idea, and I don't seriously think the legislative leadership is either. There's no support in the legislature for a tax increase, and clearly about 2 years ago, voters said no very resoundingly to a tax increase, and I don't think there's going to be one.
All right, I want a quick answer from both of you on this one because I say I got just about 25 seconds to go. Did the Republican leadership drag their feet during this last election, hoping that they would get a favorable justice voted to the Supreme Court, and so not as much work has been done as should have been done? Quickly.
I don't think
yes or
so.
No?
Not at all.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
It's exactly my prediction of what you people would say. So we're in good shape. Bill Phillips and Scott Pullins, thank you so much for being with us. I have a feeling you're going to be here a lot from now until probably midsummer. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Dave.
And the Ohio Taxpayers Association also approves of the Republican solution. It says the House plan represents our best hope to solve Ohio's school funding problem. The plan provides more money for education by cutting other government spending, not by raising taxes. The association also said the General Assembly should pass that plan ASAP as soon as possible. It only has until June 15th to meet the Ohio Supreme Court's deadline to fix school funding. It is that time of year again, tax time, but are you up to date on the changes in tax regulations? Maybe you rely on your CPA for that, but we bet you have some definite opinions on taxation and policy matters. What do you know about the marriage tax, the death tax, use tax, and other taxes? Where does your money go, or are you just too taxed out to care? Is it your money or the government's money? Good evening, I'm John Fortney, and tonight Ohio's talking tax policy. Are there too many taxes?
Ohio issues, Ohio voices, Ohio people. Now, Ohio's talking.
Well, that old countdown's already begun. Ohioans have just more than 30 days to get their taxes filed. Estate taxes, marriage penalties, the Bush tax plan. Is it the government's money, or is it your money? Talking to us tonight about taxing issues, especially changes in tax policy and proposed changes in policy, Scott Pullins, the Executive Director of the Ohio Taxpayers Association. Scott is frequently called upon by the Ohio legislature to testify and advise on pending legislation. He also serves as an advisor to the Tax and Fiscal Policy Task Force for the American Legislative Exchange Council and is a member of the Tax Committee of the Ohio Chamber of Commerce and sits on many other committees. He has his bachelor's degree in political science from OSU, and he is also right now enrolled in law school at Capital University Law School in Columbus. Thanks a lot for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk taxes with us tonight. Toll free if you want to talk about some policy out there. 1-888-OH-TALKS, 1-888-648-2557. That's toll free, no taxes involved on the toll free tonight as we talk taxes. I want to get you on the record right off the bat. Last night we had Bill Phillips on. We were talking about the school funding plan. The Ohio Taxpayers Association is on board with the House Bill 2 plan.
Yes, we are. We strongly support the House plan to solve the school funding problem, and the coalition that brought this lawsuit and our organization have probably different ideas on this issue and have been on different sides at different points on this issue. But so I think it's real important that both of us can sit down and say this is a good plan, and this is Ohio's best hope to bring this decade-long litigation to an end.
Yeah, I don't want to turn this into a big school funding show again, but when we talk taxes, I mean, everybody has a school levy out there every now and then. Now, what is it about the school funding plan that appeals to you now that did not appeal to you then?
Well, I think most of all, number one, the coalition has signed off on this deal. So we know that if this plan passes, the state's going to go into court and sign a consent decree, and this lawsuit will be brought to an end. Before, the coalition really has never been specific about what they wanted, so now we've got a target to aim at. The next important thing, I think, is this funding plan involves no new taxes, no tax increases. They're going to get more money to schools by cutting other agencies in state government, and I think that's what most Ohioans agree with, and certainly our organization agrees with that.
Certainly sounds like a plan, but hey, easier said than done, because we can take a look at what's happening right now with the Job and Family Services Department. The governor's plan to close down the 56 offices throughout the Buckeye State. A lot of people very unhappy about that. Anytime you cut back on state budgets and departments, and already with a very lean state budget, the people come out and really complain, and many of them have very good reasons why they're complaining. I mean, somewhere we're going to have to find the money, especially if the economy stays soft for a while.
You're right, and it's going to involve making some pretty tough choices in the state budgeting process, but I think we have the House members in place to make those tough decisions, and clearly a House Speaker that's very motivated to, get down into the depths of state government and line out those items and find the cuts that need to be made.
Would your group still be against bringing back State Issue 2, the 0.5% sales tax increase that failed 80-20 back in 1998? Would you still be against that kind of a measure?
Yeah, we'd be against that, and clearly the House is against that, and clearly House Speaker Larry Householder and Governor Taft are against raising taxes. We're very committed, and they're very committed to getting this plan done without raising taxes.
Let's talk about some other state tax issues tonight. The use tax has been getting a lot of play. You know, if you ordered off the internet this year, you live here in the state of Ohio, you're responsible for paying the sales tax on this, correct?
That's correct. And this tax has been on the books since 1936. But it really hasn't been enforced until now, and I think it's because of the growth of the internet and catalog sales this has come about. Essentially, if you buy something on the internet and the company doesn't collect sales taxes for it, you're required to voluntarily send in those tax dollars. Problem is most people aren't going to do that, and they've tried here in Ohio now by adding a line on your tax form to get people to send it in. We think that's a bad idea, and the experience in other states has been, folks still don't send it in, and we would prefer they just abolish that tax for individuals.
Now, I read an update on that. The state tax department was actually requesting a list of people who have done business with some of these internet firms. For example, if you buy books off of, Amazon or something like that, and they know you're an Ohio customer, the state is asking for that information so they can send you the proper notification. I guess the state has the power to do that.
I suppose they do, but I think it's a bad idea to utilize that power. We're really concerned there about privacy concerns. I don't want the state of Ohio to know what I buy on the internet. Frankly, it's not government's business what I buy on the internet. And we think that's just a way of harassing taxpayers into paying these taxes.
But as tight as the state budget is right now, and we've done the story, I know we interviewed you, we also interviewed the people from the state tax department, and they say, right now, we all know how the governor has said this is a very tight state budget, some $250 million at stake here. That's a lot of money. If we're talking about $1 or $2 million in the overall aspect of the multi-billion-dollar budget that we have here in the state of Ohio, that's one thing, but $250 million is a pretty good chunk of change.
Well, I haven't seen any reliable study that shows that we're missing out on $250 million. I mean, that's the number coming from the tax department, but the number I've seen from the Ohio Public Expenditure Council is around $34 million. And I know the experience in Michigan when they tried to do this. Last year they collected a little over $2 million from citizens voluntarily sending in the tax. So I think when it really comes down to brass tacks, there's not very much money out there, and there's not too much to be collected.
I also wonder what it would cost then just to recover that amount of money as well for the state of Ohio. Let me take a quick phone call tonight. Raymond from Minster, Ohio. Hi, Ray. Go right ahead, sir.
Yes, I had a question for the speaker.
Sure.
On the current school building programs, I was concerned of why there's 7 construction managers in the state of Ohio handling these projects. They're all getting somewhere approaching 9% of the contract, and we're talking many billions or millions of dollars being spent for a guy to sit in a trailer to manage somebody else's money. And there's only 7 of them in the entire state. Why isn't those funds being used to fund the schooling? Because exactly $0 is available to operate after these
Sure.
$9-10 million buildings are built. The other question I had is, why do they take a school community with 2,500 students and spend $10 million to build a school that has a lobby like a casino in Las Vegas? Literally.
Sure.
If you need a picture, I can give you a picture. Instead of spending it to educate the students.
I think those are good points, and I've at least on the second one, and since it is tax season, we'll do LIFO accounting. We'll take last in, first out. Where does the Taxpayers Association, and maybe you don't take an official stand on who draws up the plans for these schools, but certainly you're for spending money wisely. You're for responsible spending of tax money. On the second point, design and architecture of schools. Your opinion is, where does the Ohio Taxpayers Association go there?
Well, it's my understanding from the Ohio School Facilities Commission, which is the agency set up to manage this construction, that they're using pretty much standardized plans. And I haven't heard of any schools like this being built with state funds. Now, clearly, when you go into more of the wealthier suburbs, you see a lot of pretty palatial palaces up there, you know, with indoor pools and so on. But those are built with local tax dollars.
We never had that down there in southeast Ohio, did we?
No.
Swim team, what's that? Well, anyway.
I think that's when it floods out back at the high school. But for the first question, we found, looking at governmental projects, that construction managers actually save tax dollars as long as they're separate from the construction company. Okay. Anytime when you have the construction company and the construction manager being the same company, then you run into problems. But if they're separate individuals, separate companies, they can kind of oversee each other, and it actually saves tax dollars, I think, for the most part.
Was the Taxpayers Association, now on a related note before I go to break, were you in favor of State Issue 1 about a year and a half ago, the big bond issue to generate money for schools?
No, we weren't. We were concerned about using bonds to fund school construction, and we were concerned that that plan could lead to, you know, tax increases down the road. But frankly, it seems to be working okay so far, and we're going to continue to monitor it closely, but I haven't seen any major problems yet.
All right, we'll stop here, take a break. We'll come back. More calls on the toll-free tonight as we talk about President George W. Bush's tax plan, $1.6 trillion given back over 10 years. Can we rely on those budget projections? What about the debt? Is this responsible spending? And it all gets down to what we've said before. Is it really your money? Toll free, 1-888-OH-TALKS, 1-888-648-2557. More money retroactive to January of this year. Well, it's already passed the House. The Senate is going to be a tougher battle, though, being at 50-50 with Dick Cheney, of course, will be casting the tie-breaking vote on this. $1.6 trillion. Most people can't imagine $1 million, although I think I could get used to that idea, but $1 trillion over 10 years. Democrats and some moderate Republicans are saying, look, this is irresponsible spending. We need to concentrate on debt reduction. We don't need to take the tax brackets down. And the Taxpayers Association says what about W's plan?
Well, we strongly support the Bush plan, and I think if you look at what the president said during the joint address, we're actually going to pay down as much debt that is possible to pay, you know, because there's only so much debt that's out there that can be bought back. Some of it is held in long-term debt, and you don't always want to buy that back. So I think debt reduction will be taken care of. I think this tax cut is a very good plan. And frankly, that $1.6 trillion is a lot of money, but it's only a fraction of the surplus dollars that will be coming in over the next 10 years.
What are we talking about then on the projection from the government office? $15 trillion, something like that over 10 years?
I think that's the number that they're talking about. So, you know...
So less than 1/10 of 1% then?
Right. Right, and I think they're setting aside a few $1 trillion for debt reduction, and I know they're setting aside some money to help shore up Social Security and some other plans like that too.
Or less than about 1%, rather. I said 1/10 of 1%, or less than 1% is what it would actually come out to be. But you know, we've seen the economy. Look at the economy right now. The dot-coms were huge about a year ago. Then suddenly on Monday, the NASDAQ falls below 2,000, getting back over the 2,000 number today. But a lot of these companies, soft earnings. The Dow Jones Industrial is also soft right now. The economy certainly is slowing down. Some people saying we're very close to recession, although we have not had negative growth. We have seen a reduction in the amount of growth. But how hard are these projections, do you believe, that we can really count on them in the face of a soft economy here nationally and also what's going on globally as well?
I think the projections for surplus are pretty solid, and I think it's important that we cut taxes now to actually stimulate the economy and get the country moving again, in the words of President John Kennedy. Frankly, you look at most of the major stock market indexes, we're now in the bear market area. The only one that isn't is the Dow Jones, and it's down, I think, 13%. It needs to get down to 20% to be in bear market territory. If you're invested in the NASDAQ or the S&P 500, it's been some pretty sad days in the last few weeks. Frankly, the last few months.
And even people with 401k plans have seen some negative growth there as well. Let me take another phone call tonight. Parker from Salina, Ohio. Hi, Parker. Go right ahead.
Yes, I had a question on one of the previous callers.
Okay.
On the school projects, the scope of the project is keeping those smaller local contractors from being able to bid. In Lima, Ohio, for instance, there was a $15 million school, had one bidder on it. They are in the process of evidently rejecting those bids, and that was due to the construction manager process of combining. In fact, the construction managers were asked point blank if they couldn't break them down into smaller projects, and the school board was told no. And I was,
well, we can get an opinion on
what
that.
it is forcing the cost up.
Sure, Scott.
It sounds like in this case it could be a problem, and I know that we're actually doing so much work in school construction that we're really running into a shortage of contractors. So I agree with the caller. It's something important that if there's smaller contractors that can bid on the work and even do pieces of it, they should be allowed in to bid on the work.
So you need to try to find a synergy within your set amount of dollars that your bond issues raise locally and also on the state level, that the way the law calls for right now. What is it that the state funds? 80% if you can raise 20%? I can't remember what the ratio is.
Yeah, it's actually on a sliding scale, and the poorer the school district, the larger the percentage that the state pays, and I think it even goes up as high as 90% or more in some very poor school districts.
Where are we right now in the state of Ohio? I know it's a huge issue right now on Capitol Hill. It was vetoed a couple times by Bill Clinton, but with the whole estate tax, we have addressed that here in Ohio. Where do we stand in Ohio on estate taxes?
Well, we phased out a very substantial part of the estate tax through legislation that was passed, I believe, last year. And now there's a joint committee that just started meeting, and their plan is to phase out the estate tax completely in Ohio by the year 2006. And they started out the right way. It used to be in Ohio, you started paying taxes on estates at $1, and you know, if you inherited a small estate, you know, $10,000, $25,000, which isn't a lot, you paid a pretty substantial tax bill on that.
Can't afford to keep it at that time.
Exactly. I mean, you're using half the money to pay off your tax bill. So we've increased those limits, and I'm fairly certain there's strong support from the Senate President and the House Speaker to phase this out by 2006.
Where are we then nationally? Because I know George W. Bush would like to also phase out the estate tax. What kind of budget revenue does it bring in? Because right now I think the cap is $650 or $675,000 that are non-taxable. Anything over that, you pay the estate taxes on.
Right. I think relatively in the federal budget, it brings in a pretty small amount of money.
Maybe a percent of the total budget.
But I think the number is in excess of $100 million federally. But it's still, you know, in the context of budgets and the trillions of dollars, it's a small chunk.
Aren't we only benefiting the rich, though, to get rid of the estate tax altogether?
Well, frankly, the rich don't pay estate taxes because, you know, they can put together an army of accountants and lawyers and estate planners in order to get around the estate tax. You're really hurting people that maybe own a car dealership that's worth $1 million, or they own a family farm that's worth a couple $1 million, and they pass it on to their descendants. and then all of a sudden they have the choice of either selling the dealership of the farm or paying the tax, or not being able to pay the taxes. It's really the smaller businesses that are, worth a few $1,000,000 that are really taking the big hits.
Sure, their overall assets, what they're worth, yeah, their overall value on assets might be worth $2 million, but they might only be having a net income of profit-wise of about 3% or $250,000 or $300,000 on the year profit-wise.
It's the old saying, we're property rich, but we're, dollar poor. And what happens is a lot of these farms is in overall value, they're worth a lot of money, but they probably don't generate a lot of income every year.
What about the marriage penalty? Are we going the right direction with the marriage penalty? I think a lot of people would like to maybe, married filed separately, but although everybody tries to get the most back that